Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you all so much for being in your cozy, warm houses and coming to our program tonight. We're really excited about this program. It's particularly timely considering if you can see anything outside any of your waterways, they're all frozen over. And tonight we're going to be talking about our local streams and our watershed system and the health and the physical conditions of them. And one of our board members and EP member, Stella Koch, is here tonight. And I'm inviting her to introduce her old friend, Shannon. And since Stella was kind enough to ask Shannon if he could join us tonight. So, Stella, I'm going to let you take it away. But before you start talking, hold on a second. I just want to say after the presentation, we'll have some little time for Q&A. And then we're going to have a little thing moving into another subject all about the unified sanitation districts and the update on that. And there's some surveys on not only the dump, but also on the Unified Sanitation Initiative. So that'll be at the end of this. But thank you so much. Shannon's here. This is exciting. And take it away, Stella.
So I've known Shannon. I don't remember not knowing Shannon for a long time. He is the assistant director of Stormwater Planning Division in Fairfax County, and he's an environmental scientist. And he was one of the people that was first hired into a department of mostly engineers when they started shifting the way they looked at streams. And he's been doing this work for 27 years. And he basically manages teams of ecologists and environmental scientists and stormwater inspectors. But what I will tell you about Shannon is that I used to serve on a committee called EQUAC, which made recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and I wrote the water resource chapter. And whenever I needed anything, and I mean anything about streams, I called Shannon and he always had the answer. So I'm very excited that he agreed to do this for us. So thank you, Shannon.
My pleasure. So, are we going to record this for posterity? Is this already recording? Okay,
Yes.
It's recording.
Great. So just a little bit about myself. I've pretty much grown up here most of my life, except for being born in Athens, Greece, and a brief stint in England. I've pretty much grown up in the streams around here my whole life. And as a kid, playing in streams was my pastime. That's what I did. I would grab a bucket and a net, I'd go down the stream, put my boots on, and I'd go explore nature. So naturally, that's where my education led me to. And once I finished my education, I sought a career in playing in streams. And I was very fortunate that right at the same time I was looking for a career, Fairfax County board decided they wanted to get a full assessment of all the watersheds and streams in the county and determine what their condition were, what management actions needed to be taken, what the problems were with the streams. They wanted a full-blown assessment. So I was hired on with a small group of limited term employees, ecologists to assess the streams of Fairfax County. And so
it's not bothering me.
We did that in 1999 and 2000, and we developed the first major baseline assessment of the county at that time, and that was the springboard for basically where we are now. And so I will get into that with you guys, that history, but just to let you know, that's my passion. It's fish and bugs and streams, and digging around in the mud and streams has really been my lifelong passion. So hopefully, if I switch my screens, let me just test. I'm going to switch this PowerPoint to my mapping program. Are you guys seeing a different screen now?
Yep.
Grateful.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so what's going to happen tonight is I am going to use the PowerPoint presentation to guide me and to provide you guys with visuals. And then occasionally I will jump over to the mapping program and I will be able to move around, show you some data, show you information. You can stop me, ask me questions. I can turn things off and on. So it's meant to be kind of an interactive exploration, but also a discussion. So if you guys have quick questions while I'm going through, speak up. And if you don't understand something you're seeing or you need clarification, just let me know and I will be happy to stop and give you that information. So without further ado, here are the topics that I've assembled tonight. Stella basically asked me to bring forth a bunch of information about the area where the Great Falls Citizens Association was located. And so the first thing I had to do was like, well, what's the geographic boundary of this area? What defines the Great Falls Citizens Association? And I was told it was the zip code. So that made my life a lot easier. I could say, okay, let me draw a box around this area and I can focus on this because we have 400 square miles of area in the county. And I wanted to make sure I was hitting home the area of interest for this group. So the zip code 22066 is the Great Falls zip code. And so that's what I've chosen as my basic unit for assessment tonight. So we're going to talk about the streams and watersheds fundamentally. You know, what is where you live. We're going to look at what some of the historic land uses were for this area. Then we'll talk about the natural physiography, the landscape, and the land cover of this area. We'll look at zoning and land uses that are predominant here. I'll show you some of the major infrastructure utility that exists in your area. We'll move on to watershed impervious surfaces, which are a very important topic in watershed management. And then we'll move into the stream condition assessments, of which there are many, and this is kind of the heart of the presentation, the information we've collected over the last 2.5 decades on the county, and that's really the focus of what I want to share with you guys tonight. But then we'll talk about, well, what are we going to do about that? And that gets us into watershed management plans. It talks about the projects that we have identified and the projects we have implemented and the projects that we are planning. That's a very crucial part of the talk. And then at the end, would be remiss not to talk about, well, what do active citizens want to get engaged? What do they want to do about it? Because it's all great to know all this stuff. Being educated is the first step, but taking action and doing things is really the big next leap forward. So that's kind of the agenda. And again, if you have questions or you want to make a comment, just let me know. I'm going to keep going through here.
David, can you sign out a teeny bit?
So the first thing is watershed. So I'm assuming everybody here, I'm assuming this is a pretty savvy bunch. We all know what watersheds are, right? They're the area of land that drain to a certain area. So anywhere you go to a river or a stream and you stand there, if you look uphill, everything that drains to that point is that point's watershed. So watersheds can be really small, like a puddle in your backyard, or they can be as big as a 64,000 square mile Chesapeake Bay watershed, which collects all of that drainage. So in Fairfax County in the early 70s, they formally delineated all the watersheds, and these are the units by which we work. There are basic building blocks across the landscape. And as you can see in this map, we have some big ones and we have some small ones, and there are 30 in total. Fairfax County is almost 400 square miles of land area. We have 30 watersheds and over 750 miles, 800 miles of stream channels in that small area. And Fairfax County is the most populous area in the state. And in fact, the population of Fairfax County is bigger than like 6 states. So there are 6 states that have less people than Fairfax County has people, if you can wrap your head around that. So our population density is pretty high, right? So we have almost 3,000 people on average on every acre of land here in Fairfax County. And when you contrast that to the Great Falls area, you guys have 662 people per square mile, which is, 5 times less than the county average. So you're in an area of low population density, and it's probably why you chose to live there. It's probably why you enjoy it and why you're interested in this corner of the county. There's about 90 miles of stream in your zip code, and there's only 4 major watersheds. So if you look at my map, you see this yellow outline. That is your little neck of the woods in Fairfax County. So I'm going to pull up the map and let you see some of the named streams and watersheds. So if I turn on the streams and ponds layer, hopefully you'll see that vein-like network of blue lines. These are your drainage, the major drainage patterns in Great Falls. And you can see there's there's a couple big ones here. And if I turn on the watershed boundaries, this is basically what's saying these drainage units are common to each other. So let me turn on the watersheds. That'll be a white line. And sorry, bear with me. So what we see is we have 1, 2, 3, 4 watersheds that are in the Great Falls area. This one is difficult, a portion of Difficult Run. This one over here to the west is called Sugarland Run. And the 2 whole watersheds that are in your zip codes are Nickel Run and Pond Branch. So we use watershed boundaries as our basic commodity in managing watersheds. Those are the units by which we work. And you can break these down into smaller and smaller pieces because, sometimes it's just too large of an area to work with. So if we break them down into smaller units, you can see that we have these named what we call watershed management areas. So you have Nickel Run, you have Jefferson Run, which is a tributary to Nickel Run. You have Clark's Branch, you have Mine Run, you have Captain Hickory and Difficult, you have Piney Run, and then you have some direct drainages directly to the Potomac River. So this is how we kind of subdivide and break down our management areas. And then if you take it a step even further, I can actually show you that we have, let me turn off the streams here for you. See these yellow boundaries? These are even smaller subwatersheds. We call them subwatersheds. And those are the units by which we do our basic assessments. So we look at various scales of the watershed when we manage them. So going back to the presentation, you can see we have major watersheds, which are up to 58 square miles. Difficult Run, this one over here, which is in your area, is the largest watershed in the county, and it's 58 square miles of drainage. When we start breaking that down, we get into watershed management areas, which are 3 to 5 square miles. A lot more manageable when you're talking about where do we want to do projects, what do we know? And then if you break that watershed management down into even smaller building blocks, you get what we call subwatersheds. And these are our smallest unit at about 100 to 300 acres of drainage. So those were those much smaller units that I showed you. So you know the 4 watersheds now that are in your area. You have Sugarland Run, Nickel Run, Pond Branch, and Difficult Run. So what do we know about these watersheds? Well, we got to take a look at what happened in the past to understand what's happening in the present. A lot of times people think that all of the problems with our streams that we're dealing with right now are due to us and this current generation. And the reality is these streams have accumulated impacts for hundreds of years. Even before European settlers got here, we had Native Americans living on the land. They would do prescribed forest burns. They would sometimes log small areas. So any human existence on the landscape has a significant impact on the land. But it really changed when the European settlers got here. So when they first got here, they basically logged all of this area in the metropolitan Washington area. So that immediately caused changes in hydrology. It caused erosion of streams. It caused sedimentation, loss of soils. And so we've been kind of dealing with impacts to these streams for generations, not just in the last 100 years after World War II or, in the last century. So it's important to keep that in context when we look at how do we fix some of these problems. We've indelibly transformed the landscape with our society and our culture. So anyway, it was logged early by the early settlers, and then it pretty much stayed static after the Civil War. It was largely agricultural. If you look at this map, aerial image of 1960, you can see it's all plotted out in agricultural land uses. But then in the early 70s, all of a sudden there was a big change. And now you're looking at much more intense human land uses beginning in the 70s. Here's an example right here is Folly Lick Farm, which was in the Sugarland Run portion of your area on the western area. Dairy industry was probably the biggest agricultural operation in Fairfax County because the soils were not conducive for massive tracts of wheat or corn. So dairy was the main primary agricultural usage of our land. So if we look at the um, historical imagery, and I'm hoping this will work with me. I want to kind of just give you guys a real quick tour through time. So this is the earliest photographic imagery we have of Fairfax County, and it's from 1937, which is pretty cool. It's almost 100 years old. And you can see this, it almost looks like a quilt, right? Like all these different patches of land. And you can see there are large tracts of forested areas, especially along the Potomac and in the interior corridors of some of these watersheds. We have very nice, intact second growth forest that has come up. But you can also see in the flatter areas, there's lots of this mosaic of agricultural land uses. So that's 37. Next, we're going to go to 1960. And you can see we've lost some forests and we've got a little bit more of that quilt work. So there's more ag land that's occurring and a little bit less forest, although there's some nice tracts of forest in Nickel Run right here and in Pond Branch around Riverbend. There's still some untouched forest there. Then when you get to 1972, 12 years later, about the same, you still got the quilt work of agricultural lands and you still have some of these forests, but you can see now, you can see my pointer, we're starting to get some encroachments into these large contiguous tracts of forest. And then by 1980, this is where you see the big change. Now, what do you notice here? Look at all these little dots and all these little lines that have cut into our forest and have cut into our agricultural lands. Those are all new roads and new residential subdivisions. And so even though inside the Beltway around the 50s, after the baby boom, World War II, soldiers coming home, it experienced a lot of growth. This area of the county really didn't see it until like the mid 70s. They started seeing some growth. And then if you fast forward another 20 years to 2000, you can see we got a golf course now. We have all kinds of parceled out land on the west in Sugarland Run, in the difficult run portion of the watershed. There's lots. You don't see the agricultural lands anymore. What you see is these tiny little residential lots. And so there's a big transformation between the early 1900s and the late 1900s. And then today, this is 2023. It's pretty much built out. And if you zoom in, you can see, it's all roads. There's a few pieces of forest, but these are typically associated with large residential lots. You got a golf course, and then there's a few remaining large intact pieces of forest around the Potomac River, right? But for the most part, look at all the carve outs that have occurred in here. And that's all just due to suburban growth in Fairfax County and the population expanding continuously. So that's kind of a background on what the watershed has gone through over time. Another thing to consider is what we call the physiography. So what that means is, what's the slope of the land? What is the hydrology? What are the soils? What are the flora and fauna that live on the landscape? And when you look at stream conditions, you have to take this into account because we actually here in Fairfax County have three major physiographic provinces. On the very far eastern part of the county, basically along Route 95, there's a border there between the coastal plain, this blue area here, and the Piedmont, which is the green and yellow portion in the middle. And then on the far edge, on the western portion, we have the Triassic Basin, which is actually the remains of an ancient lake bed. During the Triassic period, this was all underwater and it was a lake. So we have this, what I like to call a Neapolitan ice cream physiography in Fairfax County, where on the east you have clays and marine sediments and smooth cobbles that were under the ocean. Then in the middle of the county, you have the Piedmont, which is the rolling hills, the red and orange clays that you see in the soil. And in the western third of the county, you have basically soils that are sediments from an ancient lake. It's very flat. You have a lot of fractured bedrock. And because of these differences in topography and in soils, you get different flora and fauna that live there. And so when we do our assessments, we have to basically rank these areas differently because they have different foundational characters to them. So if we look at the Great Falls area, you can see you guys are predominantly in the Piedmont area. And so if you've ever taken a drive down Route 29 to say Charlottesville to University of Virginia, you have those nice rolling hills, and off to the distance you can see the mountains, but it's just really nice undulating landscape. That's the Piedmont. Likewise, if you go down 95, anywhere east of Route 95, it's flat as a pancake and it's all pine trees. That's the coastal plain. And then you have a little tiny bit of what we call the Triassic Basin right here in the very western portion of your area in Sugarland Run. And those are very, very flat areas because they were all the bottom of this lake and very fine sediments because that's what you get at the bottom of a lake. So that's the physiography of the Great Falls portion of Fairfax County. So what are the land uses where you guys live and play? On the right, this is Fairfax County's generalized land use map, and it's basically telling you what are the major types of uses of the land in the county. And so this predominant kind of yellowish beige color that you see predominating the county, that is low density residential. And then as the intensities get higher and higher, the colors change to get darker and darker. And so when we look at the Great Falls area, it's almost completely low density residential. And that's not by mistake. That was by planning, the comprehensive plan, and the vision of those before us that wanted to see certain ways for the county develop. So you can see in the Dulles Airport and the Route 28 corridor here, you can see the Beltway and some of the more intensive land uses around Tyson's Corner and Annandale and around the Beltway. And then also off to the east, you can see Fort Belvoir, that large institutional land use. But generally speaking, your area of the county has some of the lowest intensity land uses. And the reason that is I'll draw your attention to this zoning map, this green map over here. This is the zoning in the Great Falls zip code. And the dark green is zoned estate residential, which means you cannot put more than one house on every 2 acres of land. If you want 2 houses, you need 4 acres of land. If you want 5 houses, you need 10 acres of land. And so that by decree means you're going to have a lower intensity of people and activities on the landscape, which allows more natural areas to persist. And then the lighter green in the southern portion of your area is R1, which is 1 dwelling unit per acre. So again, if you want a house, you have to have a minimum of 1 acre, which is in stark contrast to other areas of the county where we may have 100 people on 1 acre of land. And that has major implications to the environment and the quality of the streams in your environment. So, and you all know this, you guys live there. It's nothing new, but I just figured I would share some of the background on why the character of where you live is why it is. Other interesting things about where you live, there's actually some pretty interesting human infrastructure here. And so I'm going to jump over to the map and show you some of the infrastructure that exists in your part of the woods. I think it's this map here. Turn off the watersheds and go to, where's infrastructure? Maybe it's this map. I'm not finding the infrastructure. Utilities, here we go. Okay, so first thing you have, which is most obvious, is this white layer, which is all your roads. So this is our transportation corridor for vehicles. And that has impacts on the landscape. But beyond that, if I turn on the major utility lines, you have 3 major energy corridors going through your zip code. You have the Colonial Gas Pipeline, you have a Columbia Washington Gas Pipeline, and then you have the Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, which runs from the Gulf Coast of Texas all the way up to New York City. And so that runs petroleum, gasoline, It's basically, it's the artery of energy on the East Coast, basically from the mid-Atlantic down to the Gulf of Mexico. And if you turn off these lines and you look at the forest cover, you can see these clear swaths that run through where these pipelines are because you can't grow trees on top of utilities. And so these pipelines do have implications to wildlife corridors. They have implications to streams and runoff. Going beyond the major utility lines, if I turn on the potable water pipelines, that's these blue lines here. So in these areas, people get water from Fairfax Water. They pay a bill. They turn on the tap. It comes from the Potomac River after going through a huge treatment process. If I turn on the septic permitted parcels, this orange layer, these are the people that are basically getting their water from the ground out of a well. It's being treated in their house. And then instead of going out to the wastewater treatment plant through a massive piped network of sewer infrastructure, it goes back into the ground through a septic field and drains back into the ground. So clearly this area of the county was intentionally kept out of the sewer service area to keep its rural nature. The problem is if you provide sewer drainage to an area, what happens to it? You get shopping centers, you get malls, you get industrial uses. And so by intention, this area of the county does not have much sewer service. So I will turn on this purple layer.
Layers of the county.
So if I turn off the septic parcels, you see these purple polygons. These are the areas in your zip code that have sewer that are approved for sewer service. What's interesting is you've got this big blob here, but when I turn on the sewer lines, there's only one single little line right here that serves something. And I don't know what that is. I wish I could tell you, but basically all these people here are on well and septic, but there is one little sewer line that connects to the sewer network here. But off to the west in Sugarland Run, that's all approved for sewer. A little bit of Difficult Run is approved for sewer. These red lines are the sewer. Let me turn off the water lines.
Do you think that's for Riverbend Country Club?
It could be. There
Because
must
of
be.
all the
No.
water.
It's
No?
Well,
Okay.
I think
No,
Riverbend's
It's for
here.
Jefferson
But
Run Road.
that is Southdown. And when John Leyland Jr. was developing Southdown, at the same time, they put the Dulles Interceptor Sewer, which is the red line there, I believe.
Yes.
And he negotiated, arguing with them about putting it across his land. He negotiated for, I believe, 8 houses in Southdown to have connections to the sewer line, but none others can.
Yep.
There are merely 8.
That sounds correct. And you're absolutely right. See this really fat sewer line? So the sewer lines are denoted by their size. The smaller the red line is, the smaller the collection line is. So this red pipeline here with the Potomac Interceptor is 6.5 feet wide. It's a massive sewer collection trunk, and it collects sewer all the way down the Potomac and takes it all the way down to Blue Plains
Yeah, it
Treatment
goes-
Plant,
Goes down to Blue Plain.
which is on the tidal portion of the Potomac right by the Anacostia. And so you can see that there's even Maryland collection systems that tie into this Potomac Interceptor, and then it just keeps going. It goes through Maryland here. That's why I don't have it in this area, but then it shows up again around. It picks up Tyson's, it picks up McLean area, and it takes it all down to Great Falls. So there's
Shannon, while we're
Yeah.
on that point, as Tim Hackman, Dranesville rep on the Park Authority Board, just very quickly, there are 3 sewer siphons that go through Scotts Run over to Carter Rock and pick up the interceptor there. Those 3 siphons in Scotts Run Nature Preserve are going to be relined. And the Park Authority just announced, actually the notice went out today, that Scotts Run is going to be closed for the roughly 3-month duration of that project, beginning on President's Day, Monday, February 16th. So while we were talking about that, I just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. So this is Scotts Run. You can see the headwaters are Tyson's Corner, which is the most impervious area in Fairfax County. So this is the headwaters of this watershed. And whenever you have that much paved area in the top of your watershed, the bottom of your watershed is really struggling. Streams are eroding, there's sedimentation, there's erosion. And so the pipeline, the sewer pipeline in Scotts Run runs right beside the stream because, like the stream, it's using gravity to go downhill. And because of all that development in Tyson's Corner, the stream is like eroding places where the pipe is. And so it's threatened in many places. And so Scotts Run generally runs from here, from this area north towards the Potomac, which you just referenced. And I believe this is the pipeline you were discussing right here, if you can follow my
Yes.
pointer.
It goes through the main parking lot
Yep.
down below Swinks Mill. Yes.
And then it gets picked up by this massive Potomac collector, which you can see runs down the Maryland side and goes past DC and boom, lands right at Blue Plains right here, which is just a sewer treatment plant of enormous proportions.
And where exactly does the Potomac connector cross? Doesn't it cross about the American Legion Memorial Bridge?
So you see how I'm missing a portion from here to here? So that's where it's so far into Maryland that you can't see it. But basically, it's on the Maryland side until you get to here. And then it crosses right around Great Falls. It's at Little Falls right there. It looks like is that Little Falls? I think that is. So it crosses right below Little Falls, and that's why they built Little Falls. It's a grade control to protect that sewer line. You see this, I don't know if you guys, let me see if I can get you guys closer in. You see this structure here? That is what they call Little Falls, and they built it there to basically protect this sewer pipeline that crosses underneath the Potomac.
Well, Shannon,
Yeah.
back to Southdown.
We live back here, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
The pipeline, the sewer for 8 homes in Southdown, do we know if that's active or were they just built? There's no water service there, so they'd still be on wells.
It is active. They are on wells and it is active, and they pay a reduced bill every month for the fact that they don't have water usage. They have a guesstimate that they are assessed by, and they pay for their sewer.
Okay, thank you.
So when I turn on the potable water pipelines, I see no potable water service in this area. But when I turn on the septic permitted parcels, which is this orange layer, all of these areas have a septic field, which means they drain their septic. So you can see right here, this absence of the orange. This small area is probably the area that's being served by this one small collector right here.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the purple again is the approved service area. That means outside of that, no sewer pipeline shall be built. Inside of it, it doesn't mean they will be built. It means they're allowed to be built, right? So you can see there's lots of purple area over here where there's no pipes, but it was approved probably based on the fact of what we've been told tonight about that development at that time. So again, the purple is the approved areas. The white lines are the public water. The orange is the sewer. So what's interesting is over here in this portion between, I guess, what is that, Georgetown Pike and Route 7, you have people that get their water from city water, but they put their sewer in the ground. And then as soon as you get north of Georgetown Pike, you have people that get their water from the ground and put it back in the ground. So you don't see this a lot right here. Typically, if you're getting your water from the city, you're giving your sewer to the city. And if you're getting your water from the ground, you're putting it back in the ground. We do have areas in the county where they get water in, but they don't put it back out to the sewer system. And that's pretty uncommon. But what it means is you're pulling extra water into your watershed. So you're not pulling water from your watershed and putting it back in. You're pulling it from the Potomac River and putting it in your watershed. So you have an excess of water in your watershed, which is kind of interesting when it comes to stream flow, because that helps to sustain base stream flow sometimes. But I'm digressing.
Shannon, just another quick
Sure.
item. I think Little Falls is actually down just above Chain Bridge.
Yeah,
The point where you were showing, I think, is the Washington Aqueduct Dam,
you're correct.
and which is uh, sort of on the boundary between Great Falls Park and Riverbend Park.
Thank you. That is the aqueduct dam. Great, Little Falls. So here is, I think this is Chain Bridge here. And so Little Falls is somewhere upstream of
Yeah,
this.
it's just literally just right above the little right above Chain Bridge. Yeah, sort of right around in that area where you have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's another structure over here, which is associated with the intake for DC water right there. So let's go back to our neighborhood here and let's zoom back into that. Okay, so good discussion. If there's no further discussion, I'll keep moving and keep showing you what I had. So we talked about the Potomac Intersector. We talked about on-site septic systems. So one thing I'll just note before leaving this is when you put your wastewater into the ground, that's good for hydrology in terms of water supply. You're keeping the water in the watershed, but you're putting water back in the watershed that has a bunch of stuff that wasn't in there before. So septic systems do have the potential to adversely affect water quality in your streams because septic systems work in the shallow groundwater. They don't work way down 100 feet where your wells are. Those are generally much older water. It's protected. It takes a long time to get down there. The septic fields are working way up high within 20 feet of the surface. And that's what goes out to the streams and keeps them flowing during base flow conditions. And I'll talk about what that means when you have a lot of septic fields in your stream, in your watershed, just a little bit later. All right, so another part of utility that's really important when you talk about stream health and watershed health is what we call impervious surfaces. So these are anything that prevent water from getting into the ground. They increase runoff, and by doing so, they also increase the pollutants that are picked up in that runoff, and they typically lead to severe stream erosion and degradation. So examples of impervious surfaces are shopping malls, building rooftops, swimming pools, sidewalks, tennis courts, driveways, parking lots, all these things that we build, we drive our cars on, and we use in modern life. They make our lives easier, but they wreak havoc on watersheds. And the reason is because they imbalance the hydrologic balance of your watershed. So whereas before you may have had 50% of your water going into the ground and recharging your groundwater, you pave that over, you cover it up, and you cap it. Now you got 10% getting in, and you have way more running off. Our streams haven't formed to handle that much runoff. So when you see a really rapid urbanization of a watershed, you see severe stream degradation. And there's a very well documented relationship between this. And I put a little graphic here that we built from our own data in Fairfax County in the early 2000s. So your y-axis is what we call the IBI, it's the Index of Biotic Integrity, and it's a measure of stream health, where 0 is a completely dead stream, and 100 would be equivalent to the best possible stream you can imagine biologically. You have all the fish, all the diversity of wildlife, all the bugs, the high water quality, that's 100. 0 is basically you got a toxic dump. And on the x-axis is the percent of impervious area in the watershed of that stream. So you start putting down parking lots and roads, and you get to 10%, you get to 20%, you get to 30. As you can see here, about 35%, you've completely tanked out. And you pretty much have almost little to no biology in your stream, and in as little as 35% of your watershed being impervious. So that's a very significant predictor of stream health and pollution. And we look at the imperviousness of our watersheds, and we track that because we want to see, it's a great predictor. So why is this turned on? So I'm going to show you the imperviousness of Fairfax County, and I'll compare it to where you live. So the black line is all of our watersheds. And if I turn on the impervious surfaces for 2017, here are the numbers of what we calculated as the total watershed percent imperviousness based off our 2017 data capture. So you can see we have watersheds 32, 28, 31, 35. You can imagine what the quality of those streams are in those watersheds. We also have protected watersheds in the Occoquan region and in your neck of the woods where we have less than 10%. And this is by no surprise where we see some of the best stream quality and biota in the county. And so it's very clear to us that your land uses will directly translate to stream health. So in Accotine Creek, where we have 30% of the watershed paved over, we have horrendous stream health. In these watersheds that are protected along our drinking water reservoir, we have some of the best streams in the county. And likewise, in the Great Falls area, even though you are very close to 10%, you're right at that tipping point. These are some of our better, relatively better streams in the county. So that's 2017. Now I'm going to turn on the 2023, which was our most recent data capture. And this kind of gives you a sense for where the urban centers are. So here we go. Tyson's Corner, right here. We got McLean. We have the Fair Lakes region. Look at the Dulles corridor, almost all the way up Route 28. It's just loaded with imperviousness. You have Herndon and Reston. But then when you get closer to your home, you can see that, sorry, picking the wrong button here. So just outside your boundary, look how dense the impervious surface is along the Dulles Toll Road and in Herndon and Reston. And then again, by design, it was zoned lower in your area of the county, and you have a much lower impervious count. You're well below 10%, and that means you're going to have healthier, more intact stream systems. So it's really important we track impervious surface. Anytime we take a sample at a stream, we delineate the upstream watershed, we calculate the imperviousness, and we correlate it with the aquatic ecology that we measure. So that gets me to the heart of this, which is our stream condition assessments. Is probably what most of you are interested in and not all this other nonsense I've been sharing with you. So a brief history in what we've done in Fairfax County. Like I told you before, in 1999, the board said, hey, we need a snapshot of conditions countywide in our streams and in our watersheds, and we need to know the areas that are hurting, what's causing the pain, and what can we do to alleviate that pain. And so we went out for 2 years. We collected samples throughout 114 different sites in Fairfax County, and I think I have a map of that. So these are all the sites. I think there's over 114 sites here that we pinpointed and collected data at. We collected biological data, we collected chemical data, we collected physical data, we did impervious assessments, we looked at the landscape above all of these areas, and we provided a report to the Board of Supervisors, and it said, here's your good areas, here's your bad areas, here's your areas that are in between. And then for all of those areas, we're going to give you management recommendations that are specific to those 3 categories. So see if I can get that up. I think it is, bear with me, here it is. So if you see 3 different colors, these are the management categories that we proposed after that study. In the light green areas, we said, these are your best areas, you need to protect them. And as you can see in your neck of the woods, you had a large, pretty much almost the whole area was, hey, let's protect Sugarland Run. They're good, except for Sugarland Run, because that's where we have sewer service and we have higher residential densities. The orange areas are the ones in between. And the beige areas are like, these are your worst areas. These are going to be the most expensive and most cumbersome to restore. So we had different management recommendations because you wouldn't apply the same management approach to a pristine stream as you would to an inner beltway ditch, right? And so the orange ones were really important because we said these are on the verge of turning beige. If you go in there and you protect these areas, you might get them back to green, If you don't protect them, they're going to turn out like those beige ones, and they're going to be the worst of the worst. And again, this is the Occoquan region that was down zone for our water quality and our reservoir. And then the Great Falls area was also down zone along the Potomac. And it's just very simple. What you do on the land affects the quality of your environment. And everywhere else was let go for development and human endeavor. And we see that the environment reflects that. So so that's what we did in 2001 timeframe. We recommended that the county go and do a full-blown. So these were at little points all over the county. We said you need to walk all 800 miles of the stream, take inventory of the streams, and get the physical condition of all of them, and then use that information to do watershed plans. And that's exactly what happened. We did over 800 miles of assessments on our streams, physical assessments, and then those were the basis for our watershed management plans. So now that we have an inventory, we kind of know where do we need to do work, where can we leave alone, what do we need to do where. Also, interestingly, at that time, the Chesapeake Bay Act was amended to extend the protection for perennial streams in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So what they did is we had these buffers around our streams that severely limited development right next to streams, because those forest buffers soak up pollution, they reduce stormwater runoff, and they provide us huge environmental benefits. So what they did with that revision of the act is they extended those protections farther upstream. And the only way that we could put those protections is we had to go out and walk 700 miles of stream and identify where they flow year round. If they flow year round, they get this buffer, they get this 100-foot protection on both sides. If they don't flow year round, we can't protect them under this ordinance. So the county wrote a new ordinance. They had us go out and map 800 miles of streams, determine which ones were perennial, flowing year round, and which ones were not. We developed a countywide map, and then we got these things which we call RPAs. So RPAs are resource protection areas, and I'll show you what they look like where you guys live. If I can clean up all of this. Let's see, where are my RPAs? They are right here. I'll turn the streams back on. We're going to zoom back to where you guys are, and we're going to show you the RPAs. So I'm going to turn that on, and nothing's happening. Let's try it again. There we go. So you see these yellow striped polygons? These are those sensitive areas that have been protected under that Chesapeake Bay Act amendment. And let me turn off the stream so it doesn't get so busy. So these are basically the bloodline of our landscape. They're the areas next to the streams that protect the water quality and help protect the stream and the biota that live in the stream. And so we were able in 2004 to extend these to what you see here. They were really only on the main channels, and we were able to get them on all the branches of the trees. And basically, if you want to try and cut down trees and build in these areas, there are extremely strict limits on what you can and can't do. Whereas if you're outside of the RPA, you pretty much can cut down every tree you want, just about. And so this was a major win for us. Go ahead. Did someone have a question? No. Okay. So if you ever hear the term RPA, that means resource protection area. Fairfax County has an ordinance which regulates any type of activity in these areas, especially damaging vegetation in these areas. So it's cumbersome to the people that own property that have a protected area on their property, and it limits their ability to use their land. But at the same time, it provides a common benefit to the entire public through protecting water resources. It slows flooding. It provides a huge amount of human benefits. So these are what we call RPAs. And at that time, in the early 2000s, we mapped all of these. And this made a huge difference in our water quality, because if those weren't there, developers could come in and pipe all those streams, build shopping centers on top of them, and annihilate them. And that means nothing can live there. And we'd be dealing with flooding downstream if they did that. So this was a major, major step forward for us in our environmental protection programs in the early 2000s. So once we did all of these assessments, we said, all right, we have the data. Now, how do we move forward and manage it? And that's when we did the watershed management plans. We took all this information, we looked at potential future land uses, and we said, where do we need to go identify areas to fix our problems, to alleviate flooding, to improve water quality, to improve habitat, and to ensure that our streams don't continue to unravel. And so we endeavored to do watershed management plans in the early 2000s. So between 2003 and 2010, we countywide, we did a total of 13 plans. So all 30 of those watersheds fell into one of these 13 plans. We had to group some of the smaller watersheds. So in your area where you guys are, there are 3 major watershed management plans. There's the Nickel, Run, and Pond Branch watershed management plan. There's the Difficult Run for those of you in Piney Run, Cap and Hickory. And then there's the Sugarland and Horsepin Creek watershed management plans. These were significant undertakings. And by the time they were finished, we had hydrologic and hydraulic models of the floodplains. We knew where the water would be when we have a 100-year storm. We knew areas that would flood. We knew areas that were severely degraded that might need help. We did this in conjunction with the public. We had massive public involvement campaigns. We had public forums to take input and get feedback. And out of these plans, we got 2 really big things. We got management and policy recommendations, and we got a huge list of potential projects that we could go and do if we had the money, right? If we had the money, here's where you need to focus your efforts, and here's the priority list of how to do that. And so of all these 13 watershed management plans across the county, we ended up with 1,900 proposed projects. Now this doesn't mean we're going to go do those projects. It means if you have the money, here's where you can start. So 1,700 of those were structural projects where you design, engineer, and build it. And then 200 of those were what we call non-structural. Those can consist of public education, planting trees and streamside buffers, rain barrel programs. And so if you look at this color block list here, this is basically all of the different types of projects that were proposed in the watershed plans. You can see we have buffer restorations, public outreach, land conservation, removing dump sites, flooding projects, stormwater ponds, stream restorations, rain barrel programs, street sweeping, studies. So there's a whole suite, a litany of opportunities that were identified, but we didn't have the money. So, okay, that's good, that's fine, but we're still being funded by the general fund. So what do? In 2009, through working with the Board of Supervisors, who was very supportive, and EQUAC support, urging the board to do what we needed to do. Thank you, Stella and company. We were able to establish the countywide stormwater service district fee. And that's basically, it's a utility fee for managing stormwater. You pay an electric bill, you pay a sewer bill, you pay, natural gas bill, but nobody was paying a stormwater bill. And the county was having to pay this out of the general fund. And so at this time, many other jurisdictions established stormwater utility fees. And so we finally got dedicated funding in 2009 to actually go out and start really comprehensively managing our watersheds. That was very convenient timing because President Obama at the same time declared by executive order that the Chesapeake Bay will be cleaned up, and pollution budgets were established immediately, which means legally jurisdictions like Fairfax County, Prince William County, Loudoun County, DC, they all were going to have to reduce pollution every year in their jurisdictions. And the pollution was nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, because those were the 3 pollutants that they had determined which were most impacting the Chesapeake Bay's health, which is like a global treasure. So it was very timely that we got the funding, because that that pollution budget encompassed the entire county. Nowhere in the county did we not have a requirement to reduce pollutants for the Chesapeake Bay. So it came part and parcel and at the right time. And since that time, in 2009, when the Chesapeake Bay pollution budget was established, we're at about $125 million in implemented stormwater improvement projects just for water quality. That's not our flooding projects. That's not our pipe infrastructure repair. That's not our emergency management. That's just for water quality. We invest about $25 million a year on water quality and stream improvement projects. And it's predominantly done through stream restorations and stormwater detention pond retrofits, where we make these things look like more like natural wetlands, mimicking nature and getting much more pollutant benefit, and at the same time providing nature with much better habitat for our flora and fauna of the county. So if you're into this kind of thing, you can go online and we have an interactive map that you can explore our capital projects that are either active or have been constructed. You cannot see all the proposed projects because, quite frankly, we're not going to get to all those, and some of those are on private property where we can't do them. But what you can see is all the projects we've completed and any projects that are active right now. So the map you see here is the projects that have been built or implemented in the Great Falls area. And as you can see, we have outfall improvements. We have a dam safety project here. We have stormwater pond retrofits. We have stream restorations. And so I'm going to show you just a couple examples of projects that were done in your area under this program. So for posterity, I have PDF this presentation because I have a whole bunch of links in it for people that are interested, want more information, want to explore, or want to get more involved. These blue text are links. So we have a stream restoration set of pages that explains why we do stream restoration and what it entails and what to expect if there's a stream restoration that might be happening near you. We also have this second link, which is the stormwater projects page. It explains our capital improvement program, and it also provides that interactive map that I was discussing. You can go and look at different projects. You can find out its status, what its cost was, when it was completed, things like that. And then the last two links are links to projects that have been, like example projects that have been completed in Great Falls. And really the star of this showcase is Piney Run at Lake Werowance, which Stella could probably tell you much more about than I could because it's in her backyard. But in cooperation with the public, we were able to seize a huge opportunity on an old non-stormwater pond that had breached, and it blew out the dam, and we had thousands of tons of sediment sitting in that floodplain waiting to be eroded and shunted downstream to the neighbors and to the Potomac River. And so we really wanted to get in there, stabilize that sediment, create a new stream channel, and create all kinds of offline wetlands so that we had flood abatement, because when a huge flood comes, that's a huge opportunity to capture all that water and store it in wetlands and provide, obviously, the nutrient reduction benefits and the wildlife habitat that wetlands provide, but also the flood attenuation. So we did massive wetland cell restoration. We did a stream restoration through there. If you're interested in more on this project, you can click this link. Another example of a different type of project we've done in Great Falls is the Great Falls Nike missile site, stormwater enhancements to their athletic fields. And this is a poor picture, but I'll try to. This is the largest underground stormwater detention facility I've ever seen in my life. A gravel. It's like 4 feet of gravel across like 2 acres of land. And the idea is when it rains, the stormwater goes in there And instead of just rushing off the landscape and eroding streams and picking up pollutants, it sits in this underground detention gallery and slowly seeps out, very much the same way as groundwater does. So we mimic nature here. We knew they were putting in turf fields, and we said, hey, can we add some money to this project? And can we store stormwater under your athletic fields and reduce downstream erosion and flooding? And so that's the Nike missile site that was the old World War II part of the missile defense system. It's now a park. That's another example. And then the third example I've provided is an example of an outfall restoration where you guys have probably seen this. You walk in the woods, you see a stormwater pipe that daylights, all of a sudden it's coming off the street. And then downstream of that pipe, it's like the Grand Canyon. It's just blown out like a shotgun. So we identify these areas and we go in and we establish grade controls. We lay back the banks. We put in vegetation. We put in step pools that slow down the water, stop all the sediment erosion, and actually are great habitat for frogs and birds and native vegetation. So as you can see here on the left is a slumping bank that's vertical. It's failing. You can see the stream's all cloudy with muddy water from all the sediment falling into it. And then the after over here, you see this beautiful native vegetation, wildflowers growing. We have step pools. We have no erosion. We've got all these plants sucking up pollutants and attenuating the stormwater pollutants and flow. So I just wanted to give you all just a couple examples of different types of projects that we have done in your area, but we do these countywide. And quite frankly, it's kind of challenging to do these in Great Falls because so much of the land is privately owned. We have to get easements. We have to pay for permission to do these projects. So we need a lot of landowner support. We need a lot of cooperation from HOAs and communities and civic associations. But when we do have that, we see massive benefits both to the community and to the environment. And they allow us to propagate our program, which is a countywide program. So this slide is a handout that we developed of Lake Werowance at Piney Run. And if you want to come back to it later and read it, it tells you about how we conducted the design. You can see the before when the lake was full. You can see the after the dam had breached and we had all kinds of silt just ready to flow downstream every storm. Here's an example of the types of structures and offline wetlands that we built. Here's a plan view. And then we also quantified the nutrients and sediments that were reduced annually every year by doing this project. So my voice is hoarse. I'm over my time. I can talk about this stuff all day, as you can see. So what does that all mean to you guys? Well, you guys are a very engaged and active group up there. I've heard from your members and residents many times over the years. And these are the types of things that we suggest to people who want to get more involved and have a passion in this. On your property, can you reduce impervious? Do you need all that pavement or can you replace it with something that'll infiltrate water? Are there areas where you can take it out of turf and plant native vegetation? Do you have a stream that runs through your property and do you mow the lawn all the way down to that stream? Because if you do, that stream's probably eroding into itself. Whereas if you have trees there and you leave them alone, nature's going to take care of itself and that stream most likely will be buffeted from erosion because of all those tree roots. So avoid mowing to the stream, plant what we call streamside buffers. They suck up pollution, they reduce soil erosion, they provide shading and habitat. We also advocate using less fertilizer, herbicides, and pesticides. We all love our green lawns. They're very aesthetic. It gives us that hearkening back to the rolling European landscapes that the people that settled this area wanted. But in reality, the things we put on our lawns typically wreak havoc on our landscapes. So we recommend that if you do use fertilizer, only use it in the fall to bolster the root system of the plants. Avoid using it in the spring when you have a lot of rain and it washes that pollution, those nutrients off, we're paying thousands of dollars of pounds to get these nutrients out of water. And you can go to the hardware store and buy 1,000 pounds of it and dump it in there, which would cost us $1 million to get out. So be conscientious when you spread fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, and tell your neighbors, help them to understand. I think most people would do the right thing if they knew it was right. You can get volunteer and organize with community stream cleanups. We support that. We have all kinds of resources online. We'll give you bags. We'll give you gloves. We will haul it off for you. We will teach you how to organize it. So if you're interested in a community cleanup, we will help you do that. And then the biggest thing is get educated. The more you understand, the more you know, the more effective you can be, and the more you can impact your community around you. So what I've provided here, this link right here, is a link to about 4 pages of hyperlinks for resources for homeowners and residents. And on the right, you can see the what it consists of, and it's organized into categories: native landscaping, smart lawn care, protecting riparian buffers and resource areas. If you want to build a rain garden or bioretention, you can get a cost-sharing grant with the Soil and Water Conservation District, and they'll pay for half of it. You want to build bioswales. Do you want to hire professionals to take care of your property that actually understand this stuff? There are registries that will identify the people that aren't just Joe Schmo landscapers that just throw anything down. They actually have been trained and certified in native landscaping and Chesapeake Bay practices. And so I call it runoff. And I developed this list of links for a presentation I did for the Braddock District Climate Action Conference. And so I'd encourage you guys, if you want to get engaged, if you want resources to do more, click this link and you can find more resources and sometimes even money to help you do it, if not technical support. So I have gone over my time. I want to stop talking. Thank you all for letting me give my spiel. And I would encourage you, if you're interested in anything about our stormwater management program, you can go to this base website right here, and you can learn about our education programs, our monitoring, our flood control, our pollution control, what we do with the community, you name it, it's all there. So with that, I am going to stop talking and take any questions.
I have a question.
Okay, Karen, go ahead.
Thank you first for such a wonderful presentation. It really is you've done a magnificent job. But the question I have for you is that we are now faced with the fact that our Board of Supervisors is considering changing the auxiliary living unit designations in this county. And we have been very careful for years to try to keep our zoning here in Great Falls open, and that we have more land per house, as you rightly acknowledged.
Right.
So my question is, will they consult with you about by adding all these extra dwellings to our land if they decide to pass this, because for some reason the Board of Supervisors thinks we need to be more crowded than we are already. So my question is, will they be consulting with you about this?
That's a good question. They will definitely be consulting with DPD, which is our Department of Planning and Development. And DPD is keenly aware of our concerns with increased impervious footprints. And so I believe that the concern with increased impervious area will absolutely be part of that conversation. And I'm like you, I don't really understand what the impetus is for this. I think the board is trying to find creative ways to develop affordable housing, but I think there are unintended consequences of this auxiliary living areas. And quite frankly, I think they're probably only going to apply it in certain areas of the county under certain types of zoning. So in other words, they may not allow it in some areas and allow it in others. I don't think they're trying to see more houses in the downzoned areas. I think they're trying to find creative ways to provide more housing in the areas where we have more dense urban centers. But to answer your question, I hope the board comes and talks to the Department of Public Works and asks us our input, because our primary concern is for the environment. And we have to, our mission is to create and preserve a sustainable community. So whatever they do, it has to be sustainable, both from the environmental perspective, but also from the human infrastructure perspective. So I don't know if they will ask us. I suspect they will. And so more to come on that, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question.
Amy? Amy?
Oh, hi. Hi, Shannon. Thank you. That was a wonderful to hear all this put together in one
Bye.
well articulated piece. This comes up all the time, and I really appreciate it. My question to you I actually literally wrote out 13 questions, but my main one to you is what is the public process for input to your group at the Stormwater Planning Division? In other words, I mean, how do you ever cultivate public dialogue? Or is there some kind of comment cycle? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's been a very enhanced focus on public engagement over the last 3 years. I think it largely stemmed out of the equity discussions that the board has been having, and a lot of the equity initiatives trying to provide equitable resources for all residents in the county. We just underwent a year-long process to completely overhaul and improve our public involvement procedures as it pertains to capital projects. Meaning, if we're going to go build a project in the community, we have a whole new, pretty rigorous set of criteria that we have to do to engage with the public. So the first part of my answer to you would be probably the number one way to engage with the county as they do their work is through projects. So whenever we do a project, we have public meetings, we have a public hearings, we have public request period for information, we go to neighborhoods. So that's the primary mode in which we intake public comment. But from the bigger perspective, we are evaluating revisiting our watershed plans, management plans, because they're getting to be about 20 years old now. And when we do that, there's going to be a massive public involvement effort. And that is where it's going to make a lot of difference, because that's a big scale. Like what you're talking about, I think is like higher level, not like this one project in my backyard, but more like larger level. I think the watershed management plan public input, which is going to be coming up in the next couple of years, would be the best way to get the high level input. And then there's all project specific input. Somebody needs to mute.
I was actually part of that the program that just looked at, made that big list of watershed management projects. And
Yep.
I was part of that, and I'm glad to hear you say that that's going to be revisited. My experience was that most of those did not get built, and I really I thought that was kind of sad. I mean, I think there was so much.
There's a couple of reasons for that.
Yeah, like storms and hit different areas.
Can I ask Shannon to do something? Can I ask Shannon to answer Amy's question by talking about how much money they get in and the cost of these projects? And because I don't think everyone realizes how utterly expensive they are.
Yeah, so the 1,900 projects that we identified, I think the price tag on that was like $500 billion, and that was in like 2010 dollars without inflation. So we're kind of, unfortunately, we can't put all our money in one place and see let's see how good we can get it. We have to distribute our money across all the supervisor districts. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is where we want to do work, we can't always do it because it may not be our property. We may not have access. We may not have easements. Particularly in the Great Falls area, it's mostly private property. So if we want to do a stream restoration where there's 15 private lots on that stream, unless we get all 15 landowners to agree, we can't do it. So those are just a couple of the reasons why we haven't been able to implement all of those projects. Obviously, money is always an issue, but there's also the logistics of implementing those projects. And quite frankly, some of those projects are old technology, and we would actually probably do something different nowadays. But
Great,
Okay.
great.
so there's a whole series of reasons why we weren't able. And again, those projects were not put out there to say you will do all 2,000 of these. They were put out there to say, if you have the funds, you have the resource, and you have the willingness of the community, here are the areas where you can do some things that are probably the places to start. So a lot of people think the watershed management plans are a list of projects that shall be done. And the reality is they're a list of options. And if you can implement those options, you go and do them. So,
Okay, thank you. How about
Yeah.
Bill Dink?
I thank you, Shannon. That was a great presentation, and glad to see technology keeps marching on.
It does.
20 plus years ago, when I lived in McLean, when I was there working the Kent Gardens Pimmet Run assessment. And Marilee Pierce was involved with that too, but she's much younger than I. But
Yes,
I
we
have a
all
bunch
were.
I have a bunch of questions, but I think anything in terms of aquaculture is not your swim lane. So I'll put those aside.
Mhm.
Since I was told Nichols Run was suitable at one point to be a habitat for trout, part of it. But I'm going to go back to where we were in 2017. And I think it was mostly working with Matt Myers at that point
Yep.
on
Great guy.
the is he still there? Yeah.
Yep. He's with
Yeah.
a different outfit here, but he's still here. He's up in the county executives working with Office of Environment and Energy Coordination. Great guy.
Okay. Well, what we did, Lindeen Patton and several other people, was do. I'm sure you know Glenn Slowboom, who moved down to Richmond. We were deeply involved in the fact that the BMPs were not being managed properly,
Yep.
yet the county was considering them fully active in their calculations for their outflow to the Potomac that
Yep.
we felt was somewhat dishonest. Um, and so there was a go around with the BMPs. Could you talk a little
Mhm.
bit about how they are being managed at this point?
Yeah, so that was recognized early on is that we're taking credit and we get a prescribed amount of nutrient reduction credit each year for a BMP. The reality is it could be overperforming. Most cases, they're underperforming. And so we did a couple countywide studies on these BMPs and we actually monitored them. And we found as we expected, and what reality would dictate is that not all of them perform exactly to the number that they're ascribed in a book. And we studied them a little deeper. And what we found out is there's three main reasons why they weren't working the way they should. One, they were designed improperly for their location. Two, they were constructed improperly. The design was good, but the construction was poor. Or three, they were designed well, they were constructed well, and they weren't being maintained well. So those were the three things that we found. And pretty much predominantly, we found the majority of the problems were with the maintenance, which is actually the easiest one to fix. If it was designed wrong and built wrong, that's a lot more work to go back and fix it. But if it was designed right and built right and is not maintained properly, that's a lot easier to fix. And fortunately, that's what we found. So we developed a whole new protocol for our inspections and for our required maintenance of these BMPs. And we sent letters to industry, to the folks designing them and building them, saying, we started an inspection program saying that we are actually going to come and make sure that it is built to spec. Whereas before they were just being built and we would just check the box. So there's been a huge advance in the especially the more innovative BMPs, rain gardens, bioswales, sand filters. Those are the ones we found that were so new that a lot of people hadn't worked out the kinks yet. And so I think we've gotten to a place now where we have a much greater emphasis and control on the maintenance and inspection of those facilities so that they are performing more closely with what they're being ascribed in the literature and for our regulatory reporting and compliance.
You, not tonight, but provide a scorecard and the map. I know we had a map of BMPs as to what you think the state of play is with the BMPs we have in our zip code here.
Your zip code has very few BMPs compared to other zip codes, right? Because you don't have a lot of stormwater infrastructure in Great Falls compared to a Tyson's Corner or a Springfield. And some of them may be older. But yes, I think what I would encourage you all to do is to, if you want to get into more technical discussions about the details, is to email me, and I will send my email out to you all because I'm looking here at this presentation and I see the website, but I don't see my email. There's my phone number, but I can share my email with you all, and I'd be happy to follow up or get you answers for any more detailed discussions you'd like to have. But in terms of BMPs, our maintenance program, it has improved exponentially. And so I think the state of the BMPs in Great Falls is probably better than it was 15 years ago.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll send Bill your email address. Okay, anybody else? Okay, wow. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you. A round of applause may be the best presentation you might have ever had. I think this could be for our entire Great Falls community. This is a great way for people to learn a whole lot more about where they're living and what they're living on, and how valuable it is, and how incredibly proud and dedicated we should be to having an amazing community here and try to protect it. So I'm blown away. Thank you so very much, Shannon.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Shannon.
And
Yeah, we have
Stella
an
for
amazing-
getting Shannon to come tonight. This is just over the top fantastic.
We have an amazing program, and I don't think people understand how incredible Fairfax County's programs are and how dedicated our leadership is to seeing them out. And so anytime I have an opportunity to share just a snippet of that to people, people are just taken aback because they just don't understand all that's going on underneath the scenes. And so again, please feel free to share this presentation, share my email. I'd be happy to answer questions or come back and have a more focused discussion. So
Well,
anything you guys
Shannon,
like.
I think we might be, you'll be hearing from us again. It was
Perfect.